Welcome to the Podcast Discovery Show, the podcast that's about other podcasts, where every single week we have a book club style discussion about a podcast we recommended last week. And at the end of this episode, we're going to recommend a brand new one, and we'll talk about that one next week. I'm Kirk.
And I am Zach. And this week we are talking about a show called Gastropod. And each week on Gastropod, hosts Cynthia Graber and Nicola Twilley serve up brand new episodes every 2 weeks that break down the hidden history, surprising science behind different foods and farming related topics. And that's from their website. And it really can vary across all of those different fields. You know, it really is not limited to they're going to talk about a specific food item. They really do dig into the history. And this episode we're talking about is called Snack Attack.
Snack Attack. Yeah, no, I had never listened to this podcast before. I think I had seen it suggested to me because I've listened to multiple shows about food.
Yeah, I had the same experience.
But yeah, it's a great, at least specifically this episode, they talk a lot about the history. I loved how they had like some sound bites from like old timey commercials about stuff. And I don't know, I had never thought about this angle. I've never thought about the origin of snack. Like, what is a snack?
I hadn't either.
I didn't know it was a thing that wasn't always a thing.
I think we need to start here. Are you snacky? And I'll be honest with you. I kind of already know the answer, especially if it's pickles. You're very snacky. But is that something that like all throughout the day you like to snack?
So, yes, I do like to snack. I don't snack all the time, but I definitely, if I have access to beef jerky or peanuts or a trail mix, I'm going to be snacking on that quite often.
I've found it like goes in cycles for me. You know, if I get in these, like, I'll have like weeks where I just want to snack all the time and I will snack a lot. And first of all, I also am aware that it's not like a healthy thing that I'm doing. It's like I'm hungry and I'm just going to eat more than once, you know? So it's like, I don't know. But it was definitely interesting to hear, first of all, that it's not something that just everyone does. You know, there's a cultural element to this.
Yeah, I had no idea that snacking was a cultural thing.
Yeah, and they said that some people just straight up, I don't snack. So I guess that means if it's not time to eat a meal, just no. Get that out of here. I don't want it. And I can't imagine that world. I don't know. I guess it's just we're too ingrained in the snackiness because they do start going through. It's really cool how they break this down in the show because they show you how all these progressions went. You know, they showed you how these started to really come into prevalence. You know, and one of the craziest things for me on this episode was that literally they think that the main thing that started the whole craze of snacking was packaging that could keep things crispy.
Mm-hmm.
That's literally it. So they figured out a way to put something in a bag that would actually keep it crispy.
Was Cracker Jacks, because apparently one of the first snacks was popcorn. You know, that's what people would eat at like ball games and circuses and events, and popcorn. And then they started making Cracker Jacks, which is, you know, popcorn with caramel on it as well as peanuts mixed with it. And have you eaten Cracker Jacks recently?
Not recently. I liked them last time I did. It wasn't. It was a while ago, but
they're not something that I think of that I'm like, oh man, I want some Cracker Jacks. But if I have access to them and I eat some, I'm like, dang, these things are good.
They taste good. I think it's mostly because it's sugar. It's just like a lot of sugar on popcorn. And
Can't go wrong.
There's a lot of things that people eat where
people do eat a lot of things, Zach. You're right.
Well, okay. Like even cashews, you're like, how did you first discover this? Because it's like inside of a berry, and I don't think the berry is edible. And so it's like, how did you figure this out? But then like popcorn, I get, you know, somebody dropped corn and it blew up and they're like, well, that looks tasty. And then they tried it and that was it. Story over. But yeah, no, it was really cool to hear kind of how these things went about. And then they were also talking about the main way that people were snacking early on was at like events. So if you went to the circus or if you went to sporting event or things like that. So it kind of got a weird connotation. I had never once thought about the cultural like zeitgeist side of snacking. I've never thought about it once. So it was pretty crazy. They were bringing it up in
They
such
even
an
talked
interesting
about
way.
like not only just some cultures don't snack at all now, but that there's basically different cultures have different amounts of meals per day, just based off of a lot of it being economics, or just, tradition and stuff like that. I don't know. It was fascinating to think about. I never really thought about it. I've never thought about, where snacks came from, how many meals a day does everyone eat, that the people in the Ukraine eat giant like breakfasts and they don't snack at all. Like I didn't know that was a thing.
Honestly, I can kind of see that though, because I don't really eat breakfast very often, but a lot of times I will get snacky before lunch. But then if I eat a giant breakfast, I'll skip lunch entirely. And I don't know, have they finally come to a consensus on whether breakfast is important or not?
Oh yeah. It's not, it's just another meal.
And I think that it really, part of the problem is people were eating sugar things for breakfast.
Yeah, I mean that's I think that's the marketing campaign that made breakfast the most important part of or most important meal of the day was like sugar mini wheats or something. I don't know.
Yeah, no, but I think if you ate something healthy, it's fine because then you would maybe snack less. I don't know. It's funny because even as they were talking about it, I still feel unsure about whether you should be snacking or not. It seems like maybe not if you can avoid it. Just drink water or something. I don't know.
Just drink water. I don't know. I think there's healthy snacks. Have a fruit.
Have a fruit.
Some peanuts. We do that at work sometimes. Peanuts are a good snack. It's just they're satiating. They keep you from being super hungry. But they're not really bad for you.
Yeah, I think it's about limiting what you're doing. Because they talked a lot about things like Doritos and Cheetos and all basically about chips. And this was another really interesting part of it because they essentially know that this is a blank canvas for making as delicious a thing as you possibly can that will literally like make people not be able to stop eating it.
Yeah.
And I do think that happens. If I had the desire, I feel like I could destroy an entire bag of Doritos in one sitting. Like there would be no like you could just do it because it's
so
just
easily.
that flavor that like the flavor powder is everywhere, and you're like, oh, it just tastes good, and I need some more.
Yeah, you're not eating it because you're hungry most of the time. You're eating it because it tastes good, And I've eaten. I probably shouldn't say this, but I've eaten chips or snacks specifically on road trips. Where it's like the worst, where you're just like bored and you're just gonna snack. I've eaten stuff to where I feel sick because I've eaten so many freaking chips.
Yeah.
Or
well, the last road trip we ate enough high chews that we could like had an entire like passenger seat filled with
I don't
like
think
wrappers.
I felt that good by the end of that road. It just you get that road trip heavy stomach because you've got
there's no avoiding it.
It's like if you stop at a gas station and buy a bag of peach rings and eat the whole thing, you've got this like giant gelatin thing in your belly that's taking forever to digest. It's gross. Also, the thing that blew my mind is that Cheetos, or corn curls as they were originally called,
corn curls,
were actually repurposed cattle feed. So it was literally cattle food that they were making. And what happened? Like they were making
somebody was really hungry one day and ate the cattle food and was like, that's not bad. No,
they were making the corn into a more safe thing for the animals to eat, so it wouldn't like mess up their mouths or something. It was weird. And then a piece of it fell in the fryer or something, and it puffed up, and they're like, oh.
And history was made. No, and like there is a lot of this where I'll say this, regardless of like, I guess the ethics behind it, these companies are really good at taking advantage when they can. So I remember Doritos were old tortillas at Disney.
Mm-hmm.
And that was it. And now they're not, obviously they're not trying to like find a way to get rid of tortillas. They are a huge company and one of the most popular like chips ever. And so it's really interesting how these companies just really leaned in and were like, hey, it's potato chips. And it is funny that like a lot of these things, like we talked about breakfast, they're like, oh, it's the most important meal of the day. It's going to give you lots of energy. Chips have never once tried. They're like, no, it's, you know what it is. It is a fried potato. It tastes great. It is terrible for you. You get it. We're not going to talk about it.
It's a vegetable though, right? Potato chips are vegetables. So are Doritos.
It's a real flexible term for vegetables.
It's like when you go to Cracker Barrel and you look at the vegetables and mac and cheese is on there. You're like, I'm going to eat my vegetables.
I want to see the plant this grew on. That's interesting. No, but they really have just kind of like been like, okay. And that is maybe, I'm guessing the main issue with snacking is, for the most part, if you look at like percentage of options, it's vastly bad. The vast majority of things you probably just shouldn't ever eat, because like the serving size on a bag of chips is like, oh, you can have 4 potato chips. No one in the history of the world has ever eaten the recommended serving size of potato chips.
Serving sizes on things is usually a freaking crock. Like, it's just a joke. Not all things. Some things it's like, oh, 1 container worth. But most things are just
but
like
then it's useless too. Because if it's the whole container, then why have the serving size? I think it's mostly because if they did a serving size for a bag of chips, or like, I wonder if they do it so they can divide the calories down by 40. You know what I mean? So they're like, oh, it only has 100 calories. It's like, yeah, for 4 chips. So they're able to like break this down that way.
Yeah. And I thought it was fascinating. They did talk about these giant companies like Doritos going into places that didn't normally snack. Like they talked about specifically the example of when Doritos started making a push in Thailand, which culturally did not snack. It wasn't a place that was used to snacking or anything else. And what they were doing was they were giving out cell phones. If you bought enough bags of Doritos, they'd give you a free cell phone.
How many Doritos is it?
I have no idea.
I'm in the market.
You're in the market for a new cell phone. I'm sure it's a great cell phone.
Yeah, no, I bet it's fantastic. I got this phone by eating Doritos. No, I'll say this: Asian countries, they have taken it to another level. Because like our boss would bring in chips from the Korean store, and they have crazy flavors, like a crab and all kinds of interesting flavors. So
squid.
It's not exclusive to America, but there are some countries where it's just not a thing, and I don't know. I've been kind of on a not snacking kick, and not by any decision, just I haven't been feeling it. So we'll see when it comes back. They
talked about, they interviewed a scientist in here who had done a study in the correlation between snacking and obesity. And by the time they started the study in the United States, it was kind of a little bit too late because everyone was snacking. So it was kind of hard to have a control.
Everyone's already obese.
Yeah.
Joke's on you,
but
researcher.
They said that he went to China, which was just at the beginning of like the snack push. And he did a whole study, and I forget how many years they were there, but it was like, it used to be like 1 in 50 kids was obese. And they said it was like 1 in 5 by the end of like 3 years or something.
1 in 5 kids is obese.
It was ridiculous. The number was stupid. And it was correlated to snacking. And they call it like, what is it? Like uber processed food, or like
where there's nothing
mega
left.
Processed.
Yeah, not
ultra mega.
Yeah, not that there's like one element of it that's a processed food, that there's literally no elements that aren't processed foods. It was once a potato chip in theory. It was at some point it looked at a potato, but there's no like potato in there.
Speaking of things that aren't really what they seem to be, they talked about Pringles, and I loved that little tidbit because I had heard that, I believe, but I didn't know that there was a kind of like a feud between Pringles and the potato chip market, because potato chip market is like, hey, you're not a potato chip. You're reconstituted potatoes in this weird like shape and all this other stuff.
They're not wrong.
Also,
it is a weird shape.
It is. I don't dislike Pringles, but they just taste a little weird.
And what did this come from? Like they had extra tennis ball cans? Like what's happening with? I don't. There's a lot of things that I don't understand.
This
about
guy
it.
invented the can so that they would stack perfectly, and he loved it. He was so excited about his can that he invented that he was buried in one. They put his ashes in a Pringles can tube when he died.
Well, I really hope no one ever finds that because they're gonna pop and they're gonna stop. Because it's
I don't like
good.
that joke.
Is that too dark? I'm sorry.
It's very dark.
He did it. He buried himself in a Pringles can. I only take a little bit of blame for that.
But yeah, it was a great show. And it was really fascinating to see the progression of how what we know as a snack today started. You know, they talked about latchkey kids being like one of the turning points because before it was, you know, not that prevalent. But when you had all these kids coming home and having to find something to eat before mom got home from work and could cook dinner, they were eating snacks. So the parents made sure to keep the pantry full of easy to eat, easy to, you know, got to cook it. You just open a bag and, you know, go to town. And that being kind of a turning point. I don't know. There was a lot of stuff. I never really considered how much of a factor crispiness is in snacking. The fact that, like, if you think about it, almost all the snacks we eat are crispy. Like, it's just a weird thing.
It's a good texture. I don't know what else to say about it. It's a great texture. But yeah, no, and also definitely check out their website. We will link this episode specifically, show links. We'll have their website's page on this because you get all kinds of cool stuff. You have all of the guests they had on there because throughout this episode they had, I'll just go through some of these. A food writer and historian named B. Wilson. Nadia Berenstein, a flavor historian who studies the science and technology of food. Barry Popkin, a nutrition and obesity researcher at UNC. Sachin Panda, a professor, and he actually started a Center for Circadian Biology at UC San Diego. And
he was fascinating when he was talking about like every part of your body has its own circadian rhythm. That was fascinating. I wanted to dig more into that because that's something I want to learn a little bit more about.
Yeah, it was serious. It was funny because I kind of had always assumed, because like you said, this gets recommended to me because we've listened to we like shows that are like this, you know, stuff that's like kind of about the culture and the story about food. And then this one, you end up learning so much cool stuff throughout. It was just fantastic.
So many discoveries in this show.
It was
the algorithm
incredible.
got us. The algorithm figured us out.
They really did, but it was really, really worth it. I personally, like, I followed the show because I think it's a great one for just, I don't know what I'm going to listen to, and you can just pick something.
I was busy, so I couldn't finish the next or start the next episode really good, but it went straight into the next one, and it was about like, what is the actual scientific solution to a hangover? I wanted to learn about that one.
I almost did that one, honestly, but like I feel like I just had a discovery about that. We're like, let's not signal that we're just always having hangovers. We're gonna act like we're just always snacking. It's better.
I don't have hangovers too often, but yeah, I get that. We did just talk about that not that long ago.
It was not long ago.
So that brings us to this week's recommendation. And I've got one that when I saw that this was a show, I was like, oh my gosh, we've got to do it. But I wanted to find the episode that I particularly want to talk about. And the reason that I thought this would be perfect is because I love the show Nailed It on Netflix because I love watching it with my kids. It's a baking show, but it's a bunch of bakers that don't know how to bake. And they give them this really difficult challenge. And it's usually be hard for a professional baker to do it.
It's like an actual challenge.
And the outcomes are hilarious. But the host of that show, Nicole Byer, is hilarious. She's so funny. And like she makes the show, in my opinion. She's just so funny. And she has multiple podcasts, but this one is called Newcomers. And it's her and Lauren Lapkus, who is also a comedian. She's been in movies. I will talk about what movies she's been in and TV shows on the next episode when we actually dig into it. But what
Dragonheart.
they do, I don't think that she was in Dragonheart. What they do is they go through a very nerdy thing. So season 1, they went through Star Wars, and they go into something that has a deep lore and stuff, having no preconceived notions. They have no context for it. So it's great. But the one that we're doing is they did season 2, which was Lord of the Rings. And we're going to do the episode about Return of the King, which is me and Zach's favorite book / movie in the series. And they have some special guests on that episode. And it's fun. It's a blast.
And it's about Lord of the Rings.
And it's about Lord of the Rings. So here's the synopsis of the show. It says, sometimes we miss things. For Nicole Byer and Lauren Lapkus, those things are most every deeply popular sci-fi or fantasy series out there. In season 1, Nicole and Lauren got a crash course in Star Wars. For season 2, they're venturing into the Lord of the Rings. Join Nicole and Lauren as they get to know the ins and outs of Elvish, Hobbit feet, and some all-powerful ring. So yeah, we're going to be talking about Newcomers, Lord of the Rings, Return of the King. And we will talk to you guys next week. And remember,
there's always more to discover.
Thank you for listening to the Podcast Discovery Show. We would love for you to get in touch. We have a Facebook group called the Podcast Discovery Club, and our Twitter is @thepdsofficial. We also record the show live every Friday night at 8 o'clock on Twitch. We would love for you to be part of the show while we're recording it.
If you want to support the show, we have a number of ways you can do that. From our Patreon to our affiliate links, they're always linked in the show notes. In the end, you support the show just by listening, and it means the world to us. So thank you so much for being a part of our journey.